Now, behind is what I call the China model. That's a very brief summary of what I call the China model. In the political domain, it's about selection plus election. If the Western model is about election, the Chinese model is first of all about selection. It must be based on competence, and then followed by election. In the economic domain, it's about mixed economy, what's called the socialist market economy. In the social domain, it's about society and state engaged in interactions. Actually, if you look at the Chinese state response to the demands for our society, it's usually faster and more reactive to demands from the people. So I'll give more explanations as in the next part. I describe China as a civilizational state. It's indeed very unique. I would argue China is perhaps the only civilizational state, at least by my own definition. It is, how should I put it? My definition is an amalgam of the world's longest continuous civilization with a super large modern state. Yeah. And we are the indigenous people in our own land for thousands of years. A good example is we use the same language, which was created over almost 3,500 years ago, Jiaguwen. And we are still using the language based on this system. Compared with European history, if you look at ancient Latin, ancient Greek, they are dead languages. But our old language is still alive. People can read Confucius, written 2,500 years ago, as if they were written today, So this is different. And this kind of country is unique in terms of typical features. I summarize 4 supers: super large population, super vast territory, super long traditions, and super rich culture. In terms of population, if we make a rough calculation, in Europe, an average country in Europe is 14 million people. China has 1.4 billion people, the size of 100 European countries together. Yeah. And if you compare with the UK, China would be equivalent to 21 United Kingdoms in terms of population. Yeah. In terms of territory, it's a continent. You could fly for 3-4 hours still within the same country, speaking the same language, taking the same food. Yeah. It's amazing. And in terms of traditions, virtually in every line of culture and other undertakings, whether it's poetry, architecture, military, statecraft, food, cuisine, they all go back to thousands of years of history. It's not a matter of being good or bad, it's a fact. Yeah. So everything you can trace back to its long history. It's non-stop, it's there. And in terms of culture, again, it's so diversified and so rich. I made an interesting comment, people feel amazing. I said if you look at the population in China, a typical person from Shanghai or Shanghainese, or a typical Pekingese, a typical Cantonese, 3 major groups of city populations in China. Their way of thinking, even way of life, even you check the linguistic structure of their dialects, the divergence between these 3 groups of people is wider than a typical British, a typical French, a typical German. Yeah. Yet people live on the same roof, under one civilization for thousands of years. So people can laugh at each other. If I go to live in Beijing, they'll say, Weiwei, you are not like a Shanghainese. That's a kind of joke and compliment. People will not be offended, So this is something amazing about Chinese culture, kind of richness. Yeah. And on the other hand, there are also challenges for China, for state governance. Given the size of population, given the size of territory, it's vast, diverse. And sometimes, I draw an analogy. It's not accurate, but to help our European audience, it's almost like, Roman Empire has survived to this day. with all its diverse cultures, traditions, dialects, linguistic traditions, whatever, but with a modern economy, with a central government. Everyone speaks Latin, Chinese will speak Mandarin, something similar, but there are also a lot of differences. Just a poor analogy to strike some similarity. And this kind of state is amalgamation of hundreds of states into one over its long history. You can trace any part of China, Shanghai included. Jiangsu used to be called Wuguo, and Wu, state Wu, and Zhejiang next to Shanghai is Yue, state Yue, and they fought each other, Yue won, and they were conquered by Chuguo, and in the end they were conquered by Qing. So it's made up hundreds of states into one. That's why I said, because the West always said, because your country has a one-party system. If you read BBC, communist, authoritarian. They fail to, it's very superficial, it's different. And China was first unified in 221 BC. Yeah. Since then, in most of the time, China was a unified country, is a unified country. And this country is made up of hundreds of states into one. Its statecraft is based on what I call unified ruling entity. It's always like this. Yeah, it's not. In other words, China has been practicing one-party rule for 2,000 years. So otherwise the country will disintegrate. As simple as that. I use the term. That's my phrase. I said in the West, political parties are what I called partial interest parties. In other words, you present part of the society, part of the interests of a given society, and then you compete with that through voting. If you got 51%, the other one 49%, 51 wins, and winner takes all. For the country like China, as a civilizational state, this model cannot work. Actually, we tried out this in 1911 Republican Revolution, and then the country degenerated into civil war and into warlords fighting each other. The country split. You could have party from Shanghai, from Beijing, and from Wuxi, from Jinan, and they fought with each other. That's the case. So, based on the tradition of unified ruling entity, the CPC or Chinese Communist Party, I call this holistic interest party. It will represent, and it represents, the overwhelming majority of Chinese population. It's an institution of over 90 million people, larger than German population. So it's not only a political institution, but a social institution. With this kind of understanding, you can better appreciate, why the party is important in China's life. It's the institution. Without the party, the country split up. As simple as that. In terms of political governance, there is an important message from Confucianism. This line from a disciple of Confucius, Mencius. He made a distinction between two concepts, which one is called the Ming-Yi, which is more or less like public opinion. The other is Ming-Xin. Ming-Xin is a rough translation would be hearts and minds of the people, or in today's political science language, I would say the long-term interest or overall interest of a nation. So in this statecraft or governing political philosophy, Chinese follow Mencius tradition. That's the way how Chinese system can cope with the rising populism, as the Western model has difficulty in coping with this. You make a clear decision because in the internet age, public opinion is fleeting, is changing every hour. State government cannot be based on this. Public opinion can be a reflection of the long-term interest of a nation, and may not reflect in the long-term interest. So in the Chinese case, for governance philosophy, Ming-Xin is always the first. It must be long-term interest. That's why China is one of the very few countries which can plan for the future. With Chairman Mao, he thought about 50 years to 60 years, surpassing the United States. For Deng Xiaoping, the year was 2050. We must fulfill this and that, modernize the country. For Xi Jinping, for 2 millennium objectives. So China had to do with this planning. And it's unique. It's not the Soviet type of planning. That was mandatory and very rigid planning, which about how many cigarettes people will consume, how many shoes we were aware. China already said goodbye to this kind of planning. China's planning today is indicative and strategic planning. It's about direction of the country, of the economy, whether you want to embrace AI, the internet, or quantum technology, whatever. So this is extremely useful for China's rise. And we not only have 5-year plan, we also have annual plan at the level of the state, central government, at level of province. I always say, this kind of institutionalized planning creates demand. That's to do with China's dynamic growth. Where people know where you are going to have a subway in 3 years, where you have whatever, and then investment will go in that direction. So this is interesting. Now, concerning selection and election, they can be put under the title of meritocracy. China, after all, was the country that invented civil servant examination system, which is called the Kezhi in Sui Dynasty, so over 1,500 years ago. So today's meritocracy is still, you can trace the origin to Kezhi system. And if you look at the criteria for Chinese leadership, now we have top 7 members of standing committee of CPC. Minimum requirement, in most cases, 2 terms as number 1 of a province, given the size of China, which means usually you have governed at least 100 million people before you can be selected based on performance to one of top 7 positions. In case of Xi Jinping, he served as number 1 in 3 provinces, Fudan, Zhejiang, and Shanghai. He performed very well, And even under this condition, he was selected to 1 member of the standing committee, actually at that time it's 9. And he was given another 5 years to get familiar with national affairs, political, social, economic, military. Then became a top leader. So this is extremely demanding, And as a result, you can argue Chinese leadership today is among, if not the most competent leadership in the world. They have handled so many situations in their career path. And then we practice consultative democracy, which is important. And I always wonder, why this Brexit. I lamented, the result of whatever. Even this very practice, I told my British friends on many occasions. I said, this referendum is what I call rudimentary democracy. If I have a user analogy with a mobile phone, it's 1G or 2G. We have to adapt to 4G or 5G. Today, in ancient Greek time, yes, very simple issues. 10,000 people, you could have referendum. Today, UK's relation with EU, it's so complicated. It's made up of hundreds, thousands of treaties, contracts. How could you have 1 person, 1 vote, and then winner takes all, and then most people are unhappy? This is a problem. I said, I counsel our British friends to consider political reform. I joked the other day. I said, without significant political reform, if you continue to believe referendum is real democracy, it's great, it's splendid, I'm afraid, Great Britain will become Little Britain. This is something very serious, and I think people should consider this issue, whether it's appropriate. In Chinese, we say, 与时俱进, stay with the changing time, rather than embrace something 2,000 years ago as if it's still working today. So I think we should have new ideas. In China, a good case of consultative democracy is the drafting of 5-year plans. It's already well institutionalized. It takes 1.5 years to formulate this kind of plan. At all levels of the society and the state, all kinds of consultations. It's comprehensive. In the end, you produce a plan which is feasible, workable, and operational. So this is important. And one reason why China prefers consultative democracy than other form of democracy is the size of China, civilizational state. In a typical, relatively small country, say by Chinese standard, 20 million people. If you have a decision, a policy approved by 90% of the population, it's overwhelming majority. The remaining 10%, it's insignificant. Yeah. But in the case of China, if something is 10% people are not happy, it's 140 million people. Yeah. The tradition has always been consult with people. Yeah. The Chinese government is the institution at all levels, local government, provincial government, central government. They use a lot of opinion surveys. And they use more opinion surveys than any governments in the world or any other institutions. Even for, say, a bureau chief in Shanghai wants to get a promotion, there will be opinion surveys behind him to see whether it's good or not. So I think this is a practice that China has used and to its own benefit. And also, consultative democracy is not only at the top level leadership decision making, but also it's part of Chinese life. In my institute, we do the same. We call this from the people to the people, one round. Yeah. If not working well, another round to the people, from the people. Another round from the people to the people. If you look at the Brexit, it's only less than 4% disagreement. Actually, if you have more referendum, the society will become more divided. Yeah, many people, I think, even fell ill, sick because of this. The future is so uncertain. So I think consultative democracy is at least good for China, and I even recommend this for UK. But what's difficult is for consultative democracy to work, you need to have a holistic interest institution. In the case of China, it's the CCP. Yeah. United Kingdom, it's not that easy. You have Labour Party, then the Conservative will not be happy. So you need a kind of holistic interest institution that people think it's neutral, it's who represent most people, and then you can do this kind of democracy. But I think it's working. Yeah.
I got one question about actually goes back to our host today. The question is, can China be trusted? So in this case, because I thought, people here to attend this event might already know a bit about China, or we are interested to know. So it's fair to say that at least people here, we are open to know about China's democracy and to explore the difference between Chinese society and Western countries. But how to get the people outside this field to get involved, and how to get rid of their fear of the democracy or the very different features of Chinese society, which is really, really different from the Western countries. And so just how to get them involved and get them their willingness to know about China, and so that they can finally trust China.
Yeah. You want to clap your hands into two hands, So you need both sides are willing to engage with each other to build up mutual understanding and trust. But so far, I feel maybe slight Chinese bias. On the part of China, we are ready, we have always been ready over the past few decades to learn from others, to learn from the West. We have learned so many things from the West. After all, we are from a culture, especially Confucianism, which emphasizes learning. And we have a saying, 三人行必有我师. If you are together with other two persons, one of them could be my teacher. Yeah. So Chinese culture is rather modest. We are low profile, and we try to learn from whatever is good for others. So I counsel our European friends, Western friends, two important messages from China's success today. One is 解放思想, emancipation of the mind. Have the courage to embracing new ideas, new explanations, new discourse, to see whether they make a lot of sense or not. And the other thing is seeking truth from facts, rather than from dogmas. And in the West, so you go to BBC, they'll say, we have our own values, very proud. But, be careful, your values could be just a dogma, and try to embrace new ideas to see whether some values should be shifting a bit, adjusting a bit to understand the new world. And indeed, I always counsel my Western friends to look at China as objectively as possible. Yeah, Otherwise, you have a lot of misunderstandings. But we're also realistic, we are not begging the West to understand China. That's not our or my habit of life. I think it's in the interest of Western countries themselves to understand China as accurately, as timely as possible. China is like a high-speed bullet train. It's moving fast. We don't wait for you, And I give you an example. The other day I was in Germany. I was discussing BRI with German think tanks. They have a lot of critique, of China's BRI initiative. I said, you try to understand objectively. Don't repeat the mistake with Galileo plan. China and EU signed a contract on cooperation for the Galileo project, which the EU's GPS program. Yeah, China put money, a lot of money into it. But then when the project started, the EU said, no, you cannot touch on this, you cannot access to that. So Chinese said, we say goodbye. We work on our own Beidou system, which is way ahead of, which is already operating, it's using, it's on the par with GPS of the United States. Same quality, if not better. Yeah, so it's way, way ahead of Europeans' Galileo plan. So I said, try to understand China as it is, otherwise you miss a lot of opportunities. So I try to convey this message. It's the interest of European countries in the West themselves to understand China as accurately, objectively, and timely as possible. Otherwise, it's not China will be the loser, Europeans will be the loser.
My name's Fred, and again, thank you. I just want to take you up on that phrase, yes, we have our problems, just to ask what you understand by the term problems.
Probably in the UK or in the West in general?
No, in China.
In China, many problems, if you look at China model, there are a few features I mentioned. One major feature is the role of the Chinese government. In Anglo-Saxon culture, the state is viewed with suspicion. It's called the necessary evil. In the Chinese culture, state is viewed positively. It's called necessary virtue. People cannot live without state. This is totally different. It had to do with historical roots because China is a large country since 221 BC, unified country. And you have a lot of natural calamities, especially two major rivers, Yangtze River and Yellow River. Which of course brought with a lot of benefits for Chinese people. On the other hand, they also caused all kinds of calamities, especially flooding. To control this kind of flooding, natural calamity, you need a coordination of the central government. You can't have just one provincial government. It will not work. It's a super large country. So as time goes by, people have this, I will not say worship, but respect for the state, especially the central government. So whatever opinion surveys in China, whether done by Chinese or by Western think tanks or opinion survey companies, China's central government is always treated with high esteem. Yeah. So this is unique. But on the other hand, if you look at China's economy, when you have a strong role of the state, it's both positive and negative. But interestingly, sometimes we feel there are too many state interventions in the economy. We need to, bring to the play of initiative from the private sector, which is very dynamic. So this is, I said, problems, yeah. And then with the state, with the bureaucracy, I have the problem of bureaucratism a lot. We complain about this every day, yeah. But on the whole, what to my mind is not whether China model or China has problems or not, is whether China can overcome these problems or not. Yeah. China has a problem of populism with the rise of social media. Everyone is a mouthpiece of whatever, his own advertising. And some people say, well, China has no freedom of speech. You just press any button, you will see so many criticisms of Chinese government, in the Chinese social internet. Yeah. And but how to cope with populism? Yeah, this is also a challenge. But the China model, I think we can cope this better than the Western model. Yeah, That's my humble perception. Yeah.